In next week's show, Karen Kay's guest will be American singing star Vic Damone. In 45 minutes on BBC2, a lesson on using the telephone in Buongiorno Italia, which follows this evening's edition of Newsnight.
Good evening. Tonight, the government faces a major rebellion over the Education Secretary's plans to increase the parental contribution to student grants. Nearly 150 Tory backbenchers have now signed a motion condemning the move. One Tory MP said tonight he'd never seen the party so angry over any government decision. I'll be asking Sir Keith Joseph whether he'll climb down in the face of such opposition from within his party's ranks. Tomorrow, Neil Kinnock and Arthur Scargill are to share the same platform at a Labour Party miners' rally in Stoke, and the NUM will be looking to the Labour leader for an unequivocal declaration of support. I'll be discussing with Brian Gould MP just how the long-running dispute has strained relations between the NUM and the Labour Party and damaged the party's standing in the country.
Tonight, Mrs. Thatcher, visiting France, has already completed her first round of talks with President Mitterrand. Afterwards, the Prime Minister said that there were no longer any problems between Britain and France. David Stockman, President Reagan's budget director, calls for $240 billion worth of cuts in government spending. Defence, healthcare and farming may all be put to the scythe. Overseas Aid Minister Timothy Raisin, back from his flying visit to Ethiopia, gives us his impressions of the famine with the aid of photographs taken by some of his aides. And a glimpse of Argentine society during the Falklands War period. David Sells has been looking at the Argentine film of the famous book Los Chicos de la Guerra, The Boys of the War.
About 150 Tory MPs have now signed motions criticising the government's plans to increase the amount parents have to pay towards student grants. As the rebellion gathers force, there were signs tonight that the government might have to change its mind. Earlier in the day, ministers were insisting that they were determined to carry through the Education Secretary, Sir Keith Joseph's measures. Many backbenchers who've not signed the motions have said they'll join the critics if Sir Keith fails to calm their fears at a Tory Education Committee meeting next Tuesday. The strength of feeling became evident at Prime Minister's question time this afternoon, when the grants issue was raised by a Conservative MP. This is how Mrs. Thatcher defended Sir Keith's measure.
My honourable friend will note that there will be 100,000 families which will not make any contribution to student grants. He will also know that we have the most generous system of student grants in the world. If you lived in Japan, it would be low, Sweden it would be low, and the United States very much less generous.
But Mrs. Thatcher's defiant performance in the House doesn't seem to have defused the anger of her backbenchers. When David Tindall spoke to two of them at Westminster tonight, they were still adamant that the government must change its mind on this matter.
I believe that Mrs. Thatcher is very much out of touch, and so is the Secretary of State for Education, with the people of this country and their objection to these proposals, particularly middle-income families who have taken a great deal of responsibility for their children, and now they're going to find themselves having to meet very substantial additional costs which are going to create real hardship for them. Their standard of living is going to be reduced by these proposals.
I'm very concerned. I think an awful lot of my constituents are very concerned. And I think it's a silly thing for the government to be proposing. One understands they've got difficult decisions to take, and sorting out priorities is not the easiest task. It's easier to criticize than to be positive, but here is an occasion where for a very, very small sum of money, they're going to cause genuine concern, real hardship, to some very fine people, and I just believe that it's wrong, muddle-headed thinking, and I am resolutely opposed to it.
It's not hard to see why so many Tories from all sections of the party are worried. Sir Keith's measures are aimed at a section of the population whose loyalties would normally lie with the Conservative Party. Sixth form pupils from families with a residual income of less than £12,000 a year needn't worry. If they